Sam Houston solemnly unhooked his sword and passed it to the Speaker of the Texas House. "It is now, sirs, becomes my duty to make a presentation of this sword, this emblem of my past office," he said. "Should the danger of my country again call for my services, I expect to resume it, and respond to that call, if needful, with the blood in my life." With these words, Houston became President of the Republic of Texas. Texas voters had elected a Congress of 14 senators and 29 representatives in September of 1836. The new Congress began work in October. It asked the interim president, David Burnett, to leave office 2 months early. Sam Houston could take charge at once. Burnett had been president only since March. However, he was already weary of the job. The challenges seemed overwhelming, and the Mexican government continued to be a threat. In the west, the Comanches and their allies raided Texas settlements along the frontier. To make matters worse, there was a great unrest in the army. Texas was deeply in debt and had little money to run the government. Examine this graphic about the new government, the president, and the capital. What main problems did Texas face after it became a republic? Sam Houston became the first president of the Republic of Texas, and Maribel Lamar, who had commanded Houston's cavalry at San Jacinto, became the vice president. One of Houston's first tasks was to form a cabinet. A cabinet is a group of people who take charge of certain duties, sort of like helpers or men to advise him along his journey as the first president of the Republic of Texas. This is very similar to the United States. George Washington originally had a cabinet. All these men, Thomas Jefferson, Alexander Hamilton, Henry Knox, Edmund Randolph, and John Adams, were very popular and very successful in the new government of the United States. 2 of them even went on to become the presidents. So being a part of a cabinet is a very prestigious position, and it gives you a lot of honor. And you are able to make really good decisions and be a leader, maybe then and also in the future. But back to Texas. Houston named Stephen F. Austin as Secretary of State. This office is in charge of relations with another country. Austin served only for a short time, though, because in December of 1836, he became ill with pneumonia and died, and he was only 43 years old. Columbia, a small town near the mouth of the Brazos River, became the site of the new capital. This was only temporary, though. A new town called Houston offered buildings and housing for the government. Congress chose Houston as the new capital, and the government was moved there in April of 1837. By May, 1,500 people lived there. Although SFA died at an early age, he was able to make great progress for the new nation of Texas. You can also see here that Columbia was pretty small and only a few wooden buildings, but it did serve as the first capital of Texas. Here is a picture of Main Street in 1837-ish. You can see it looks very different back then than it does today. So Sam Houston had 2 main foreign policy goals. And foreign policies are a government's plan to deal with issues outside of the country. So issues with Mexico or the United States. He wanted to gain other nations' recognition of Texas as an independent nation. And above all, he wanted to further avoid any conflict with Mexico. So there's 2 questions that have been on the election ballot. The first asked Texans to ratify the Constitution of 1836. The second asked if voters favored annexation by the United States. Annexations is when one country takes over part or another country. Voters overwhelmingly said yes to both questions. Houston favored annexation. He thought that becoming part of the United States would help protect Texas. However, some people in the United States opposed the annexation of Texas. They wanted to avoid war with Mexico. Some Americans also objected to slavery in Texas. The southern states permitted their citizens to hold slaves. Most northern states had laws against slavery. Annexing Texas would just add another slave-holding state to the Union. This would give the states that allowed slavery more votes in the United States House of Representatives, and this meant that slaveholding in the states would have more power. Texas leaders sought annexation. So often it is popular belief that we were our own country and we're very proud of that. However, while we were our own country, most of the leaders in Texas wanted to be a part of the United States. They had grown tired of Mexican rule. They also wanted other nations to recognize Texas as an independent nation. Some United States leaders wished to delay recognizing Texas. Luckily for Texas, U.S. President Andrew Jackson and Houston were old friends. On Jackson's last day in office in 1837, he officially recognized Texas. The United States was the first nation to do this. Texas representatives in Europe did not have the same success. For the next 2 years, Great Britain, France, and other nations waited to see if Texans could hold on to their freedom. Relations with Mexico and Texas continued to be tense. Mexico rejected the Treaty of Velasco, which Santa Anna had signed when he was the prisoner of Texas. Mexican leaders also rejected the Rio Grande as the border of the new republic. They insisted it was too far south. Houston wished to avoid another war with Mexico. In early of 1837, Houston sent Santa Anna to Washington, D.C. There, Santa Anna offered to sell Texas to the United States. Texas objected to this offer because it suggested that Mexico still owned Texas. The deal fell through, and Santa Anna went home and retired from politics. Mexico's leaders had no plans to invade Texas, yet Mexico did stir up strife. In 1838, Vincent Cordova, a Mexican agent, helped the Kickapoo Indians revolt against Texas. The Kickapoos were fighting for the titles to their Texas land. Tejanos and Cherokees also took part in the revolt. However, Texas volunteers defeated the rebels. Houston knew that the Republic had no money to fight a war. Still, many people wanted to attack Mexico. Houston had 3 domestic policy goals. Domestic policies are a government's plan to deal with issues inside of the country. First, he wanted to gain control of the army. Second, he was determined to keep the peace in Texas. And third, he wanted to put the nation on solid financial ground. Houston faced serious problems with the army. Most of his troops had returned to their homes when the Texas Revolution had ended. Most of the new soldiers were from the United States. They had not fought the war in Texas for independence. The prospect of winning glory by attacking Mexico excited them. The Army's commander, Felix Hudson, was one of these adventurers. The president tried to put Albert Sidney Johnston in charge. When Hudson heard of this plan, he challenged Johnston to a duel and shot him. As Johnston recovered from his wounds, Houston went to the capital. There he pressured Congress for an attack on Mexico. Meanwhile, President Houston sent most of the troops home on leave. He ordered them to remain on leave until he recalled them to service. With the army so much smaller, he could worry less about finding the money to pay for it. Scattering the troops also made it harder for them to gather together and cause trouble. Houston relied on the local militia and law enforcers called Texas Rangers to guard the frontier. Texas could not afford a large army. It needed to keep peace with the Native Americans. Houston had lived among the Cherokee for several years. He understood many of the problems they and other Native American tribes faced. He sent messages of friendships to several tribes in Texas. Houston tried to make the treaties with Native Americans and set up trading posts on the frontier. These efforts were met with little success. Congress refused to ratify a treaty Houston had made during the Revolution that guaranteed the Cherokees' right to their land. Also, many of the trading posts never opened. Many Native Americans grew to distrust the Republic. Texas settlers' desire for Indian land made things worse. "If I could build a wall from the Red River to the Rio Grande," said Houston, "the white people go crazy trying to devise a means to get beyond it." Improving the new nation's finances proved to be Houston's greatest challenge. There was no money in the Treasury to pay government workers. The Republic was more than $1 million in debt. Few nations or banks would lend it more money. To solve these problems, Houston pursued several policies. One of income. Congress placed taxes on imported goods, property, and livestock. Taxes did little good because most Texans had no money to pay them. Houston also tried to get a loan from the United States for $5 million. This effort failed because of the Panic of 1837 caused serious economic troubles in the United States. Texas leaders decided to print paper money. Of course, paper money is worthless unless it represents something of value, usually silver or gold. Texas had no silver or gold in its treasury. The only item of value that the government had was land, so income from the sale of land gave value to the Republic's paper money. However, Texas gave away millions of acres of land. Texas leaders believed that the new settlers were more essential to the Republic than all the money. They decided to give away much of the land rather than sell it. With so much free land available, the value of land fell. In turn, this lowered the value of the paper money. By the end of Houston's term, a Texas dollar was worth only about 12 cents. By the time Houston's term as president was up in 1838, the Republic's debt was more than $3 million. So as I mentioned, the Panic of 1837 caused serious economic troubles in the United States. It was a financial crisis that touched off a major recession that lasted till the mid-1840s. So profits, prices, and wages went down, and unemployment went up. So people in the United States started moving to Texas for all the free land.